This is Dubious Insights. So I have an ant that can wander around, and now I want to make it be able to find food. So the first thing is, can it locate the food when it gets next to it? Here I have an ant and I put a 120-degree angle in front of it, and I put that angle 1.5 ant lengths in front of it. And as we can see, when it gets next to the green food dot, the dot turns red, which signifies that the ant sees the food. So that's good. So I have it following the mouse so I can test it out at a couple different angles, and it seems to work pretty good. So since it worked for one ant, let's see how it works for 30 ants and more food. All in all, I think this works pretty good. I don't see any cases where an ant is hitting the food and it's not registering. I don't see any cases where the food's lighting up with no ant around. It seemed to work pretty good. So now, a lot more ants, 300 ants. How does it work? And obviously, not that well. First, the ants are just behaving differently. They're not wandering around, they're just going off. And the frame rate, really poor. I did a profiling of that, and I see the reason of that is that the showing this 120 degree arc didn't work very well. It took up a lot of time, it took up a lot of the computer power, and I'm not entirely sure why. So I took that out, and with 300 ants and 20 food, it seemed to work better. These ants look pretty good. So now I bump it up, and 500 ants, 500 food. Let's see how that looks. Once again, not good. This is unacceptably slow. So this is the problem. We have every ant looking at every single piece of food to measure its distance. And this is a classic n-squared problem, which means that 500 ants times 500 pieces of food is 25,000 calculations that we're trying to do 30 times a second. So that's 750,000 calculations per second, and it's just not having any of it. What we prefer to do is have the ants only look at some of the food. We don't need them to look at every food, we just need them to look at ones that they can reasonably searching for. And so basically, like in a search radius. How do we determine how big that search radius should be? The total radius that it can detect the food at is the radius of the ant search cone plus the radius of the food. So we sum those up, and that's how far away it's possible for the ant to find the food. So we don't need to look at anything farther away than that, but how can we tell what's farther away than that? So the way I did it, I'm sure there's better ways, but the way I did it was to split this into grids. So the grid size is based upon the size of the search radius plus the size of the food, and the ant is going to search in the grid it's in and the 8 adjacent grids. So it's only going to search a small percentage of the total space. And the nice thing about this is, as the ants get smaller, the search gets smaller, and the amount of food they have to search is less. The result is that this works really well for 500 ants. 500 ants runs really well. 5,000 ants still have a problem. I'm not quite sure what the next optimization will be, but I'm going to put a hold on it for now and move on to the next step. The next step is to establish an ant can pick up and carry food, and so once it sees a food, it immediately targets it and it'll carry it with it. That works well for one ant, and it appears to work well for multiple ants. Once the ant can carry food, it needs to be able to bring it back to the nest. Ideally, we'd have some kind of pheromone arrangement where we know where the nest is, but right now, to get this going, I just have the ant know where the nest is, so once it picks up food, it targets back to the nest and returns the food. When the food hits the nest, the ant drops it and it goes and searches for more food. And that was one ant, and here's 40 ants. And we can see this works pretty well. There's no intelligence to these ants, they're just wandering and then returning back to the nest, but they clear this pretty well. Interestingly, ant pheromones from my research, tend to occur more in ants that'll get big quantities of food. So if you see an ant by an apple tree, that's a lot of food that one ant can't carry. But things like in the desert, where the food might be one dried out bug that the ants can carry, the ants rely less on pheromones and more on just wandering and then dead reckoning and landmarks and even stars to know where the food is. So these ants kind of behaving more like desert ants, but the next step is going to be to get pheromones. But that's all for this video. Next video we'll do pheromones. This is Dubious Insights. Thanks for watching.